Okay, social. We all know that social is changing the world, right? It brings down governments. It also gets them elected. So we have Obama, who's probably the most famous president who started to use social media. But we also have seen social help people in times of disaster and communicate in ways that they didn't have any other way of communicating with. So it's really penetrating our society. And it's going to continue to do that. Do you know why? Because of this number, right? That's almost a third of the world on social media platforms by 2017, which is an incredible figure. And it probably will grow faster. And as we talk to Rita later about Myanmar, that's an example of a market that's just on this journey very recently. 60 million people getting onto social. I don't think you can talk about social anymore without talking about mobile. Facebook's purchase of WhatsApp proves that point. Mobility has now come to people around the world in developed countries and developing countries. And they're all connected to the internet now. Which means that I had to invent a new word. Not that our industry needs more buzzwords, so I apologize for that. But just talking about mobile is no longer enough. There's a concept that I was thinking about called mobiquity. What is mobiquity? Well, it's the ability to have mobile, the fact that mobile is ubiquitous, handsets are plentiful and only growing, and the last part is utility. Mobile phones are giving us utility like we've never had before. And the presentation before this, from Guy Hearn, you saw that. You saw how wearable technology is going to come into our lives. So we're going to get amazing utility from our mobile phones and devices. So by 2017, according to Cisco, 5.2 billion mobile users, 10 billion mobile devices, right? Maybe more based on the last presentation. But what's interesting is 1.7 billion of these are going to be machine to machine, not humans. And what's really interesting to me is that our access to the mobile cloud, so the mobile network, is going to grow 7 times faster than it currently is. So that means you're able to pull down data very quickly. Okay. So this leads to this idea of a mobility triangle. When you start thinking about social and mobility, you also have to think about 2 other things. The ability to drive payment, because your mobile phone is not just for calling, it's not just for reading on the web, it's also going to give you the ability to pay. And when you combine this with its ability to be location aware and to be social, driven from the address book of your phone, then you really do have something special in your pocket. And the company that's actually really driving this in terms of taking advantage of this mobility triangle is not the company that just got bought for $19 billion. It's WhatsApp, right? How many of you use WeChat, right? So it's not WhatsApp, it's WeChat. So how many? Yeah. So play around with it. I was just at a conference before this where the guys from Tencent were demoing their roadmap on WeChat. And the guys from Facebook were there too, and they were like shocked. They were like, wow, this is crazy. Now, these 2 examples, the red one is your classic red envelope. What Tencent's done through WeChat is they've allowed you to actually give red envelopes to people through WeChat. So you can put the money in and you can send it to people. That's kind of cool. Makes it easier. But what's even cooler is they've gamified it. You can, let's say you had 200 RMB. You could put that in and you can put in your friends and say, I'm going to randomize this so not everyone gets the same amount. Some people will get 10, some people will get 20, some people will get 0. And then you can say, well, it was WeChat that did that, not me. And people were like, okay, I'm going to put that in and just shoot it out. But it does something way smarter than any of that. It puts money into their ecosystem. So if you think about WhatsApp, it's cool, you can message. But if you have money in your WhatsApp, in this case, if you have money in your WeChat, then you're going to stay on that platform, aren't you? And you're going to use it for the things on the other side of the screen. Taxis, maybe going Dutch. So going Dutch is a great concept. You go for a meal with your friends, and then you say, I'll pay, but then you guys send me the money through WeChat. And if you don't send me the money, everyone will know that one guy didn't actually send the money. Right? So it's all these clever ways of making you stay with the application and then use it for buying stickers or virtual goods. So very cool stuff. But we can't talk about social without talking about social advertising. And I'm going to talk to Americo about that in a few minutes. Social advertising is obviously going to grow immensely, right? Facebook and Twitter are betting on it. We're starting to see a lot more native ads, and that's going to be an $11 billion industry by 2017. It's funny how that chair almost looks like that chair, and I don't know how that happened. It's really kind of freaking me out. So last couple of slides is, what are the statistics? I think everybody here knows that the numbers in Asia are huge, right? We pretty much have half of the world's internet users. We have half of the world's mobile users. And we have a little bit more than half of the world's social users. And according to our friends at We Are Social, it's about 969 million active users, which is crazy, right? And we're at the tip of the iceberg in Asia because the penetration rates in markets like Myanmar are at 1%. So what happens when these rates go up to 20 or 30? Okay. So speaking of Myanmar, the question that I'm going to pose to Rita in a couple of minutes is, why Myanmar, right? How many people have been to Myanmar? They're not bad. So Myanmar is just getting on the internet today. Can you imagine people getting on the internet today compared to when you guys got on? Like, where would you go? How different would it be? You know, your internet habits would be very different. This is an example of the Yangon police force. They use Facebook. They don't really even have a website. They do, but it looks extremely old and they probably don't update it. So I think this woman, she either got busted for selling aloe vera, but I think what's inside those boxes is not aloe vera, it was DVDs. Pornography, unfortunately. And so they're putting up criminals and they're saying, this person got busted for this, don't do this. Interesting. So the real question is, if you think about brands, is can they keep up with social? And we're going to bring Americo on to talk about that too very soon, to say, how do you keep up with social if you're a brand today? And I want to show you two examples, ones that I like. This one in the Super Bowl. How many of you guys saw this 2 Super Bowls ago when the lights went out? Right? So what happened here was that Oreo had a team of 15 people waiting for moments to happen. And then when they did, they quickly were able to create that, so that photo was created by them, and they tweeted it. And so when the lights went out in the stadium for 34 minutes, and they had to stop the game, and this is a football game that half the world watches, I believe, so they got a lot of brand recognition just from being able to react in real time. And what you're starting to see is this. This is an example between AT&T and T-Mobile. This guy tweeted what would be very normal to tweet. It's kind of messy for some reason. But what Jay tweeted basically was, hey, data roaming is free with T-Mobile, and I'm on AT&T. What the hell am I doing? Then what happened was T-Mobile says, you know what? There's an alternative to old school carriers. Come with us, Jay. Then AT&T gets into the argument and says, resist the urge, Jay. We hear your... I don't know what the hell that means. It's like Yoda was tweeting, right? Anyhow, the point is that this goes on. So Jay's basically going, like a good consumer, blackmail, I'll go for a discount. Then these guys look at the AT&T tweet and they go, whoa, is that a kindergarten panel that wrote that for you? A little bit below the belt, maybe. I like it. AT&T takes the high road. They do some more Yoda on Jay, and they're like, hey, no gloves, the holidays are coming up. But then, boom, the CEO of T-Mobile joins the conversation and basically says, hey, Jay, come on over. Jay goes, I'm over, right? Now, this is probably not scalable for the CEO to always be tweeting, but millions of people saw this. Okay. So that's it for me. I'd like to invite my panelists up, and maybe you can introduce
Shall I do the honors? Ladies and
Please.
gentlemen, joining us on stage now, two very special guests. One is a 21-year veteran at Shell, who these days joins us as the Global Media Manager, Americo Campos Silva. And we're also joined by the co-founder and CEO of SQUAR, somebody who used to run Electronic Arts' online marketing and community effort out of Vancouver. These days, she's based in Myanmar. Rita Nguyen.
Thank you, Bar. Thank you. All right. Okay, Rita, Americo, thank you for joining me. Hopefully that sets the stage for you guys to teach the audience a little bit about your expertise. But Rita, I want to start with you.
Sure.
Because Myanmar, I think, fascinates a lot of people. You're not Burmese, correct? You're Canadian.
No, I'm Canadian Vietnamese.
Canadian Vietnamese, so you have experience in Canada, Vietnam, great background with electronic arts. What possessed you to move to Myanmar and create a social network? Because that's intriguing. Can you tell us a little bit about the story?
Yeah, well, I went to Myanmar from a suggestion from a friend early last year, and I thought it might be a little bit too early to do technology there. The reality, though, is that there was so much interest and there was so much passion. The internet was coming online. The mobile revolution was going to happen with or without me, with the telcos coming online, the foreign ones. So it was an opportunity, and I thought, what other country is going to do this, and how often are we going to see this in our lives? And then the final piece of that, as a Vietnamese person, I felt like I missed the opportunities in Vietnam in '95, '96. So I didn't want to have the same regrets this time around.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit about SQUAR? I mean, people often think it's a competitor to Facebook, but that's not quite the case.
Yeah, we get that a lot. Yeah, we get that a lot, and that's not surprising, really. It is a social entertainment platform, and what we really wanted to do was come in and start to introduce this new nascent market into technologies, specifically consumer technologies. So now, when you go over to Myanmar, you'll know that there's 1.4 million people online right now. It's about 100% Facebook penetration. They use Facebook very differently than you and I would. It's mostly news. And so we wanted to provide different experiences that would introduce people to the internet in a much easier way. So everyone who's online today is an early adapter. They're slightly techie. Mostly they're hackers, actually, because up until about 2 years ago, they had to be to get on the internet at all. Yep. So everyone who's connected today is a little bit tech savvy, but that's going to change in the summer of this year, right? You're going to get masses of people coming online who have never touched the internet before, have never read a blog, they just don't even know what it is. And Facebook, as great as it is, it's not really that great of a first entry when you don't really even know what an email is. So that's why we went into Myanmar.
Okay, great. Is it true, though, in Myanmar that people are using Facebook for almost everything? Like, they're not going to traditional portals, they're not going to like a Yahoo or even a Gmail.
They use Gmail, but it's usually like one person has a Gmail account that they share amongst 10 of their friends because they need it for whatever reason. Yes, if you went into a room with Myanmar students and you asked who was on the internet, you would get a few hands up, and then if you asked who was on Facebook, you would get more hands. Right. They actually know of Facebook more than they know the word internet.
And it's not just young people. It's old, young,
everyone.
Everybody.
Yeah, everyone. I mean, certainly the penetration of internet is actually skewed younger. That's not surprising. Like I said, the whole country who's online right now, they're all early adapters. Early adapters tend to be young.
Okay, Americo, I want to ask you a question. Global head of media for Shell. Would you put money on SQUAR? Just give him an easy one, just to start off.
Or anything.
Let's say when we look at the marketing budget is, as I say, a permanent auction, and you put the money where you get the best return on. So in this case, you need to define what is your investment strategy for your marketing budget. And if your investment strategy is quite aggressive, just think about your marketing budget almost as an investment banker. And if your investment strategy is quite aggressive, then yes, most likely you would take a bit of risk and invest in this new venture. But if your investment strategy is, let's say, medium or a bit more conservative, then most likely you would avoid it.
Okay. And you're in charge of the offline spend and the digital spend, correct?
Correct.
So how do you make sure that your offline spend, which I would imagine is more significant than your digital spend, but still, how do you make sure that offline spend is then leveraged in earned and owned media? Is there a connection, or is it siloed in the organization?
Let's say the reality today, I think, for my company and for most of companies, is that the world outside goes faster than our internal structures. So those silos, they exist. In many cases, they are legacy organizations from the past, while the world outside is changing quite quickly. What we try to do all the time is to make sure that the way we are structured does not interfere on the way that we drive our marketing activities, which we start by the consumer, first of all, instead of starting by the way we are internally organized. Okay. So we try to put the consumer at the center, and that is the driver of all the different activities. And I would say that today we are working more closely as an organization than ever before, because we feel the need to work in a different way in order to be able to cope with the consumer demand outside.
Okay. There's a topic later today about native ads, which I find fascinating because the ad becomes the content and then the content becomes the ad. But as the person in charge of where the spend goes at Shell, do you feel there's a concern that if the Twitters and the Facebooks of the world do more native advertising within the feed that we're always consuming for our news, that we'll rebel? Are you comfortable with promoted tweets and ads in the news feed, or how do you feel about that as an advertiser?
I think there are two angles on that subject. The first one is that you, as an advertiser, you need to make sure that whatever you are producing, it's seen by the consumers. And that is today, in my perspective, the big barrier that we face with Facebooks, Twitters, YouTubes, is that you can produce something amazing, but if you don't put some paid media money behind it, organically, it will not go anywhere. Okay. And that's the reality. And when we see all those great stories about the Dove commercial that got 200 million views, or the Volvo commercial that got 50 million views with Van Damme, etc., all those projects had significant media money behind it. So this let's go viral thing, that is a myth from many years ago. That is the fairy tale that doesn't happen. And the reality, and I just saw a presentation from a creative agency some days ago, and they were presenting a case for the client, and they said, oh, and we didn't spend any media money on this. This was all organic stuff. And my question to them was, imagine the impact if you have spent any media money, because the results you had achieved, which were good, you could have multiplied that by 10 or 15 times more. So that this myth of not investing because it's not needed, it's a myth in my perspective. And today, we don't do any type of projects that don't have the level of investment that you think is required to make it visible. And of course, if it has traction and if it is interesting for the consumers, it will have a multiplier effect. But you need to start big if you want to be successful. If you start small, you don't go anywhere.
What about the small idea that, and I know there's not many of them, but what if it goes the other way around? So there's a small idea that goes viral, and are you then able to react and amplify it?
Give me an example of a small idea that goes viral with the scale of what goes viral means. You know, that 100 million, that 50 million.
The typical one is something like
I would say,
okay.
Let me just put the other way around. What we tend to do many times today, and I've done that this year in one particular project, is you develop 5, 6 pieces of content, yeah? And they all tick the right boxes, but you know that there are some that will be more successful than others. And you put them all online, and in hours, you see that different, let's say, different pieces of that project will start to get more traction than others, yeah? And quite quickly, almost like the Oreo example, you decide, okay, this is the one I'm putting some advertising money behind it, and it is almost, I use the expression, it's like put fuel on the fire. You know, the fire is already burning, you see that there is some traction there, and then you just amplify that fire, and it goes wild. And that's what you need to do, but you need to test different things and make a decision quite quickly.
So the theme of the conference is agility,
yeah.
right? So that's a great segue into the question of how does a global brand the size of Shell be agile?
It's complex. We should not underestimate the complexity of being agile in the 21st century. At the same time, if you do your homework properly, it has never been more simple than now. And in our case, some years ago, we have made a decision regarding, for example, on paid advertising, display advertising, or other types of online advertising, to move to one single ad server, which for most marketing people, in many cases, they don't even know what is an ad server. Yeah? But that decision to migrate to one single ad server, in our case, it allows me today to deploy a global campaign on digital anywhere in the world, live from my desk in London. Okay. And at the same time, control the performance of that campaign in different countries, different mediums, etc. Okay. So that's the type of decisions, strategic, big decisions that an advertiser needs to do in a certain moment, so that he gets that level of agility. Because if you rely in 14, 15 ad servers, which was our situation before, you can imagine that will be very difficult to coordinate the implementation of a campaign. While today, in 5 minutes, I can deploy a campaign globally through one single ad server.
So your theory is that most marketing people don't know what an ad server is?
No.
Who knows what an ad server is? Really? Well, wow, you've been proven right. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna get Rita to. You really don't know what an ad server is? Okay. All right. Maybe it's just my accent. Rita, so Americo has just described kind of the future, right? You know, one central ad server, agility. Myanmar, the ability to leapfrog is enormous.
Yeah.
Can you give us any examples or tell us any anecdotes of where you see, how you see Myanmar approaching social and digital and where that leapfrog opportunity might be? Well,
in some cases, it's already happened. So, you know, a great example, there's about 10% penetration of phones and mobile in the market today. If you go into Yangon, that's actually a lot higher because obviously a lot of that number is condensed in the cities. People buy smartphones. They buy Android phones. Cheap Chinese Android phones are about $20 or $30 more expensive than a feature phone. So they do that because in Myanmar today, voice calling is more expensive than 3G. So what happens is you call me and I don't answer. We both turn our 3G on and then we call each other on Viber or Tango.
Right.
That happens today.
Right.
And that will continue to happen until sort of the voice and data starts to stabilize. It's a terrible call connection, by the way. It's horrific, actually. But you can see where that's already leapfrogged beyond, you know, regular landline voice. There's no landlines in Myanmar, by the way. There's one or two, maybe. But so you're already starting to see some of that leapfrogging happen, and it happened before, you know, before any of us got there.
Okay, so they're doing the old missed call trick. And
yeah,
I remember that.
Yeah, you remember that? I do too.
Of course,
okay.
Of course.
And in terms of, you know, there's 2 mobile operators that are coming.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's Telenor and
Ooredoo.
I can never pronounce that,
Yeah.
Which might be a branding issue. But just a thought. Are they going to change the game? Are they going to... Myanmar must be a mobile first or about to be a mobile first market.
Yeah.
But are they really going to have a huge impact in terms of all of a sudden people connecting to the internet in droves?
Yeah, no question. So SIM cards today are, well, technically they're $1.50. You can't get it for $1.50. My SIM card cost me $350. You can get it for about $150 to $200 today. Yeah. 2 years ago, a SIM card was $2,000. So what you're seeing today in the market is people have phones and they don't have SIM cards. They're waiting for the SIM cards to come online. Telenor and Ooredoo are bringing those SIM cards online. Right. The one carrier today, the Myanmar Post Telecommunications, they have SIM cards. Those are the ones everyone uses. And they do a lottery because their networks can't handle the demand. Right. So they do a lottery. It's about 350,000 SIM cards that they allow you to buy at $1.50, and it's usually about 1 million people who put their name in for the lottery. Wow. There's a massive pent-up demand. It's not there yet. It will be very soon. Okay.
A long time ago, I lived in Myanmar. My phone cost $5,000 a year. Rented, our general rented it to us.
The fact that you can have it, though, the fact that you can have it, I mean, up until a couple of years ago, it was illegal for foreigners to have a SIM card.
It probably was illegal. I think that's why, Well, anyway, so...
That's why you're here.
So, emerging markets for Shell, right? It's obviously, there's markets like Myanmar. Yeah. How does a global brand marketer like yourself or media, buyer look at emerging markets that are still developing versus a mature market? Like a market like Myanmar, how would it even be on your radar? Or do you feel like you want to get in early, or do you want to say, no, I'm going to wait for this to hit a certain critical mass and then we'll go in? How do you approach a market like Myanmar?
But you mean from an overall Shell perspective or more from a media perspective?
I think, because if Shell's not in Myanmar, then that's not a fair question. Yeah. But I'm more interested in just how you would as a marketer and in your...
Well, the emerging markets, you tend to overinvest in those markets to start with versus the size of the business that you have there. So you want to grow your market share, you want to grow your presence, so you tend to spend more than what you would normally spend in a market that has a certain market share. Something that I found quite difficult in emerging markets sometimes is when you think about media specifically, is to try to understand the target audience that you have for certain projects, try to understand the media consumption of that target audience. And in many cases, that data is simply not available. So one thing that we have done in 3 or 4 occasions in some specific markets here in APAC was to try to understand the media consumption through some bespoke studies that you have to commission through the media agency, work together, and that gives you a solid foundation for your investment in the next 3-4 years, because the media consumption also doesn't change dramatically overnight. So you invest a bit up front trying to understand that, and that gives you a good solid foundation for the future. Yeah.
Okay, we have like a minute left. I just want to, is there a question? If there's a burning question, I'll give it to the audience. If not, can someone just shout, woo, because I can't see anything. Okay.
I think
there's a question.
We do have a question at the back. Could we have a microphone to the...
I think we'll just have one question, so you get it. So make it a good one. No pressure.
Hello? Okay. Hi, I'm Paul from the Southeast Asia Globe magazine. I have a question regarding Myanmar. You were talking that call rates are actually more expensive than 3G, and I know that so far only 29% of the overall population is connected to electricity. But as the population in Myanmar will develop and will be connected, what do you think, to what extent will the population actually jump over the traditional steps? You know, we used to start with big mobile phones, we were SMSing. Now you're connected via WhatsApp, but yeah, to what extent will the population in Myanmar actually jump over these steps and start to communicate via social media?
I think that what you're already seeing is that it's already jumped, right? No one uses SMS in the market because it's like 10 times more expensive than a minute on air, on voice, or on data. It's incredibly expensive. So I think you're going to see that anyway, and you're already seeing it. Landlines don't exist, really. SMS doesn't really exist. Anyone who has a feature phone will use a phone, but you're more inclined to see them like a monk sitting at a temple playing a game, even on a feature phone, than using it to talk. So I think that that is all happening. It's going to continue to happen. This is not a generation that is used to landlines, phone calls, text messaging.
Okay, well,
Thank
Rita,
you.
thank you very much. Americo, thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
And thank you to the audience. We give them a hand.
Thank you, Ken Mandel, for officiating.